Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Council on November 26th. I'm going to start with an announcement. The City of Dieppe chose to participate in 6 days of activism on violence against sexual assaults. From 26th to the 30th of November, we're going to participate for the first time this year for this initiative, and we're going to join Vancouver, Toronto, Halifax, and Montreal, and others for against violence against women and girls, not only in Canada but all around the world. And we've supported the literacy program with professional accountants in New-Brunswick. This program has a goal to improve education of residents in our province and help them to take thoughtful decisions. So consult the website of the association for more details. That being said, the beginning of the meeting. Thank you. Dear colleagues, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Without further ado, we'll call the meeting to order. We have a quorum. Any conflicts of interest? None. So we'll continue with the adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Leblanc, seconded by Councillor Cormier. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The agenda is adopted. We'll proceed to number 7, presentations, inquiries, and petitions. 7.1, inquiries by council members to Kodiak Regional RCMP. Any questions? No questions? No questions. Is it okay on your side? Do you have anything for us? Excuse me, Your Worship. No, I can just tell you that we're going to continue patrolling the streets. I mentioned today we were on Chartersville Road, Dieppe Boulevard, and we gave a few tickets. We checked 100 vehicles, and we're going to continue patrolling. And I always wanted to add that since our last meeting, we gave out more tickets for speeding without permits. So we're always patrolling. Thank you. Councillor Gaudette, thank you, Your Worship. I'm curious. What's happening with legalization of cannabis? It's been 2 weeks or 3 weeks now that it's been legal. Yes, since October 17th. So what's happening in this region? Is there anything different with the police on this? Councillor Gaudette. We've had many tickets. I'm surprised because I think people respect the law and nobody wants to hurt others. So our members have read the law and they know what it consists of. So if you're caught with a joint, it's sort of equivalent to drinking a bottle of beer, to have an open bottle of beer in public. So you would give a ticket for that. Up until now, everything is going well, so we're still enforcing the law as we normally would. Thank you for the question and the answer. Any other questions for our inspector today? No? As always, we appreciate your presence, but we'll understand if you want to leave a little earlier. Thank you. 7.2, presentation, House of Nazareth. Mr. René Efficient. Good evening, councillors, your worship. Thank you for allowing me to be here to talk to you about a delicate element in Moncton. We have a crisis, and it seemed important to me to come to Dieppe. So it was important for me to come to Dieppe to talk to you about Nazareth House. I sent you a presentation. You probably have looked at it. So in the next few minutes, I'll give you some figures on Nazareth House, and if you wish, you can ask me questions. Nazareth House is a service for social urgencies. We give services to people who don't have a place to live. People are in the streets, people who take drugs. So Nazareth House was founded in 1979 by Sister Rita Barrio. And I wanted to talk about the contributing factors that bring people to our house, people that are in the streets, our clients, usually have suffered from mental health. About 70% of them do, and they're addicted to substances, gaming, they lose their jobs, they're not well paid, they work. So we have more and more seniors as well. They're older, and they come for help. We see that more and more regularly, more often, because in New-Brunswick we have more and more seniors that are poor. So characteristics of poverty, it's a monetary situation, people that lose their jobs, and people that have problems finding another job. So there are emotional problems in those cases. And we must look at the person and his social environment. So those are the characteristics. So to respond to poverty, we must put into place measures for social justice. And Nazareth House counts on the community. 80% of our financing comes from the community and campaigning, financing campaigns. And we have partners. And the government wants us to rely less on municipal and provincial governments and more on the community to share wealth. So Nazareth House, like I said, is to offer a lodging which is free to people in the streets. So we have 30 places for men and women. in a refuge. And it's to encourage community living of people who are in social disruption. We have a service offered to the client to help them when they're looking for jobs and when they're looking for housing. And that's an element that's very important when we want to help a client to get out of the streets. I have a lot of figures that are recent. I give you a few pictures as well of Nazareth House. On the left is the kitchen, which was renovated with the help of the community and the government. I'll give you a few figures on the meals we serve, and I gave you a recent photo of the shelter because we're renovating. We started on October 9th, and we have the support for these renovations. I arrived on July 30th, and the first assessment I did was that the shelter needed a lot of renovations, and especially in the dormitories, the bathrooms, showers. It has to be clean because we want the clients to stay. Otherwise, they'll go back into the streets. And people ask them, why don't they go into the shelters? And they say, because there's violence, there's drunks, and it's not clean, and it's not safe either. It's not adequate. So when we heard this, we tried with the team to improve the site to give the good conditions for clients, but we haven't finished the work. Winter has come very quickly. But in about a week or week and a half, we'll be in full capacity. We're not right now. We have mattresses on the floor to be able to invite clients in so that they don't have to sleep outside. I'll talk about it later. Nazareth House as well has a boutique. We have activities where we have a shelter and we have articles given by the community, and we can sell them for $1 or $2 or $3. And some people have a white card from social development, and they receive our products freely. And we offer those products when they come to the shelter. When they leave, we find them an apartment. We give them all the necessary material in their new phase, in their new life, as furniture, for instance. So what I told you a while ago, our main resources are gifts of shoes, clothing, everything that's necessary to dress or to have furniture in their new home. And so we have a lot of gifts, and I was surprised when I started at Nazareth House that we have a community that's very strong, very committed, and gives very much, either in time or money, and they do it regularly. We also have grants from the municipality. The city of Moncton gives us $25,000 per year. And we have grants from the provincial government, from social development, for the well-being, for food. We have money to be able to buy food and to be able to give meals that are healthy to our clients. And as well, we have federal grants, and that's for hiring people during the summer, so we can hire students when our staff goes on holidays. And so we can recruit these people and have resources, staff for staff, so we can continue our activities. We also have campaigns. We have the radiothon in October, and we had more than $20,000 of promises. And last Tuesday, we had $11,500 that we actually had in hand, aside from the promises. And then we have bequests as well, either goods or money. And before I got there in 2016, we had bequests that allowed us to give fresh renovations to Nazareth House. So the solution is the treatment. That's the first thing we try to do at Nazareth House. When a client arrives, he or she can stay 30 days. And during that time, we have to build a plan to get out of the streets. And when I arrived, we had 4 computers to help them to print all the documents necessary to find an apartment. Now we have a social worker that works with them on the psychosocial side, because when we receive clients in our shelter, for these first 30 days, even if they find an apartment, they still have the same problems that they had when they were living in the streets. They had alcohol problems, drug problems, depression. So it seemed to be important to start with a social worker to work with them to identify their problems that they had in the streets and to help them to find the right organizations in the community where they can find the right tools. And when they find a place to live, they can start working on their personal problems, and they also have a place to stay. So we try to work on these 2 aspects to give them as much help, the tools necessary so that they can get out of the streets. We have an approach housing because in Moncton, in the greater Moncton area, we have a problem finding housing. There aren't very many that are affordable, and that's another problem, because if we had more housing, more apartments, people would find a place to live. They would be more stable, and they could work on their other problems. So this is my presentation. I just wanted to give you a few figures. Recently, from 2017, we had 613 admissions at Nazareth House with an average of 60 nights per client. We distribute meals. It's a refuge shelter, but we give free meals as well, and we have a boutique. So these meals, we give 17 bags of meals per day. And 2017, over 6,000 lunch bags per year. As well, we have operations, open door activities. And the last one, the last week of each month, we open our doors of Nazareth House, and we accept everybody that wants to come for a hot meal. And we ask for nothing. If you're hungry, you can come to Nazareth House and have a meal, talk to staff and the other clients. In total, the lunch bags, the open doors, and the meals that we give is 21,900 meals in 2017. And as well, we fight against unhealthy eating, because if you don't have a home, if you're homeless, you can get very ill. If you don't eat well, you catch viruses in the streets, and it's worse for the community. So we want to ensure that we want to give them healthy meals. and we contribute to the general health of our clients. So for the boutique, that's our main source of revenue. If we didn't have the boutique, the Nazareth House would not exist. Even with government financing, we wouldn't exist. It was difficult for Nazareth House at one time, and the only way that we can succeed is with the boutique. So gifts from the community is very important for us. And when revenues increase, because now we're on St. George Street, we have a lot more space. And we just concluded an agreement with Harvest House, who is going to give us grants, gifts as well. And with the public libraries in New-Brunswick will have a partnership. They'll give us books for our boutique, and we'll be able to sell them. So that's my work, to be able to get partnerships to work with us and to know what Nazareth House is and to do things to help us and the people that are living in the streets. But they're citizens in the streets, as I call them. They're like you and I. So I hope I didn't go past 10 minutes. I spoke quickly. So do you have any questions? Mr. Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Vestion, to have given us the context of what Nazareth House is. I had this experience last year doing the holidays, and I was preparing meals and delivering them to houses, and it was I really appreciate it. Thank you. We appreciate that you came. And I want to do it again this year because I could see what was happening in the house and to see the misery of these people. It's not only serving meals, but some people have places to live, but they don't even know how to cook meals. And they don't have enough money to buy meals, and if you have to pay $200, $300, $500 a month, there's very little money left to be able to take care of oneself. Thank you for your presentation tonight on Nazareth House. And I wanted to present, because for many years before I came to Dieppe, Dieppe was a partner, privileged partner, and since last year, Dieppe stopped helping us. So I wanted to come back to present to you Nazareth House in a context of our crisis at the time being, where there are more and more citizens living in the streets. And it concerns all the municipalities, not only the city of Moncton. It's Moncton, Dieppe, and Riverview as well. We're all concerned. And we need to help these people who've had an accident in life. And the majority today want to get out of their misery. So to help them, we need your support. Support from all municipalities. Thank you. Question, Councillor Arsenault. Thank you, Your Worship. Wonderful presentation. I'm curious, with respect to health, some of them come to you, they're sick, and they're not on drugs or alcohol, or they can be sick. Do you have a network of nurses or doctors that come? No, we send them to the right services. I had a client actually who came with a sore on the arm. I don't want to say it, but there was pussing coming out. It was a big infection in his blood as well. We sent him directly to Georges Dumont Hospital. When you live in the streets, clients get sick much more easily. But to answer your question, I would dream of having a service where people would come and help clients who are ill. But it costs money, and it takes investment either from the community, and we're just a small shelter compared to Harvest House, and we only have limited means. And when we want to put services into place, my team must fight to find partners and financing. Nazareth House is a public utility service. We serve the public, the citizen within our community, and it's important to have the support of the community. And it's important to have support from public organizations, from the municipalities. It concerns everybody. It's citizens that need help, no matter which city they're in. I repeat it all the time because I'm passionate about this. It's the first time I work for a nonprofit organization, and I'm face to face with so much human distress and poverty. So I tell myself I have to hit the alarm. I have to ask for support of Dieppe for many years to come, in the long term, actually. Thank you. I don't see any other questions. We'll take your plea into consideration. Thank you.
And the next presentation is our snow and ice removal plan. This will be another presentation. Good evening, Mr. Dubé, good evening. We'll be talking about snow while it's raining. It's easier if you have to move, right? That's what we call it, de-icing. So we'll present you our 2018-2019 plan. We've made some changes compared to past years. In the past, it was more of an operational plan that we showed you. Right now, we'll show you a general plan for the general public. Snow removal in Dieppe comes back to community services. Community services, we have two sectors, public works, us, and Jonathan will talk about leisure activities, leisure installations. Jonathan will talk about this. Now, to give you an idea, for the city, we have 166.1 kilometers of snow. Like Champlain has 4 lanes. The municipality also has 62.4 kilometers of sidewalks where we have to remove the snow. We don't always think it's that high, but yeah. We have 1,459 fire hydrants, 30 kilometers of trails, 31 parking lots. We have 4 trucks that will spread salt and sand. We have a shovel. We have a backhoe. 1 backhoe. I learned that recently. Yep. 1 with a front blade. That's a grader. We have 2 with chargers, like on, we have a versatile tractor. That helps us occasionally. We have 5 tractors for sidewalks, and that can spread sable. And we have a 1-ton truck that can be used to spread salt and sand. Now, when it comes to road classification, we have priorities. Number one, it's sad to say that we have priorities, but that's how we have to present it. Priority one, like the main roads, Acadie, Amiro, Champlain, those boulevards. Priority two, local streets, Bourg, Centrale, La France are examples of those streets. And then priority three, local roads, Muriel, Orléans, Marguerite, for subdivisions, for instance. Here's the map. So, for last year's plan, this was our operational plan. So it's a little bit more complicated for the average individual to understand what we're doing. So this new map gives us in color what our priorities 1 and 2. And when there's no color on the map, these are priority 3. Quickly, at a glance, you can see and find the streets that you need. Snow removal operations. We have initial interventions. We spread 24 hours before of a snowfall. We put this, and it reduces the amount of, we put water and salt. 75% is water, 21% is salt, and it's good to minus 15, just to give you an idea about, sometimes we'll spread and people wonder, what is this? Is this water? Well, it's not just water, it's salt. And it gets all white, it becomes white. So it's the same principle that if you take, it's the same idea if you have a pan and you put butter and you put your egg and it won't burn. It's the same idea, when we put brine. And it takes about 16 hours to do the whole city when we decide to spread this brine. Sometimes we can get it wrong because the weather was, saying we could get some snow and cold later on. We start, and then eventually it's wet snow, so the asphalt becomes wet, and we lose the product, the brine. To give you, we start with P3, and then P2 and P1. P3 are done in the morning before a storm. P2 and P3, because of traffic, we do this overnight. We start in the evening when there's less traffic. That's it. The next slide. I think this is the most important diagram to recall for those who have questions. How long do snow removal operations last? You can see we have the total of snow falling and its duration. So for a 10 centimeter snowstorm, we need 36 hours to remove the snow. Now I'll give you the details. 20 centimeters, it's 60 hours. 30 centimeters is 84 hours. Anything over 30 centimeters of snow, we do our best. We'll assign our equipment to do this in an acceptable timeline. Snow removal operations, including the snow removal of streets, sidewalks, P1, P2, bus stops, and fire hydrants. Fire hydrants are not done exactly like earlier in the 36 hours or 80 hours. They're done as the equipment is freed. We start slowly to remove the snow on fire hydrants, and they're assigned as they're freed up. They must remove the snow. We have 4 loaders that do the 1,459 fire hydrants. Usually it takes 3 to 4 days when they start to do this. And we're talking about our fire services. They tell us where they want us to start. Industrial park, for instance, where the risks are highest, and then etc. And I'll talk about the program of Adopt a Fire Hydrant a little later on in my presentation. How long? Well, how long will this last? It may depend on the type of snow. Is it heavy? Is it powdery? If it's hard to remove the snow at your place when you clean your driveway, it's hard for us to remove it. Exterior temperature, sometimes it's very cold, so it's more difficult. And additional snow during snow removal operations, that's something, that I have to add in the chart. When we were looking at earlier, if there's 10 centimeters and we're cleaning up and there's another 10 centimeters that falls, well, then we start back to square one. And also equipment failure, we're limited with our equipment, and when one piece of equipment will fail, we can't necessarily replace it. So we try to manage our priorities. The objective, is to clean up all streets within 8 hours after the end of the snowfall. In 30 centimeters or more, the objective is to do so as quickly as possible. That goes back to within the charts that I showed, snow removal. The chart earlier, when the last snowflake falls to the ground, then the 36 hours starts. During the storm, we do our best. We continue. But at the end of the storm, then 36 hours after, that's what we do. In terms of parking like at place 1604, we clean it 4 years after the end of the snowfall. So 4 hours after the snow is removed. The objective continued, remove the snow from parking at place 1604 and sidewalks and Champlain Street 96 hours after the storm. And snow removal at fire hydrants will be done following the priorities, as I mentioned earlier. Cul-de-sac, that's controversial as a subject, internally anyways. There's two types of cul-de-sacs. The cul-de-sacs, the regular ones with residences, houses, we distribute the snow equally to residents. The other ones, the other cul-de-sacs on Cianti, etc., the driveways are really close to each other, so we can't put too much snow in their driveway because there's no place to put the snow. So there's 14 in all. We go around once. We give snow to everyone equally in the rest. We put it in the center. We pile it up in the center. When there's 40 to 60 centimeters of snow, we go there and we will transport the snow to our snow depots. Snow depots, we use 3 sites. We have one on Ruffin Street next to our operations center, one on Cop Street at the bottom where the baseball field is, and one on Aviation Street. The major one is on Aviation Avenue, where the asphalt ends. We have a supplementary site that's used in extreme situations on Melanson Street at the corner of Centrale, just at the bottom of the hill. We have a permanent site that's been identified for the future. I believe we've talked about this in the past. In past meetings, we've talked about this. Sidewalk classification. So the sidewalks, priority 1, are close to major streets like Acadie, Champlain, those close to schools, and sidewalks near place 1604. So we want to do this within 24 hours. Priority 2, around the aquatic center, the sports center, and sidewalks that are close to main streets and collecting streets. And that's done 3 days after the storm. Just to give you an example, priority 1 in the last storm that we had 17 centimeters. It took us 14 hours. So we're within the 36 hours of snow removal that we've set. Jonathan will do his part now. Councillors, Your Worship, good evening. Good evening. For recreations, installations, we have the Rotary Park, we have 2 rinks, and we have, it's a sector at the Rotary Park that we do after a snowstorm in terms of maintenance, the cross-country trails. The municipality has 50.3 kilometers of walking paths. That represents 61% of trails. It's an increase of 7.3 kilometers of trails more than the past year. And that is like the new school. We can see that. Now, in terms of equipment, we have 2 trail tractors, 2 versatile tractors with a blade, 2 trucks with blades, 1 truck that will spread salt and sand. Now, for cross-country trails, we have 2 snowmobiles and an ATV to clean up those trails. Now, in terms of priorities 1 for trails, those P1, the snow will remove 24 hours after a storm. In close to schools and where there's a lot of people, an example like Dieppe Boulevard, there's a lot of people. In the P1 trails, we have 11.4 kilometers of snow to remove. P2, these will be done during the regular hours to finish this within 5 days. So P2 trails, 19.5 kilometers of snow to remove. For P1, during the first 24 hours, sorry, I go back on the first slide, P1 trails, we have 2 types of equipment. For P2, we only have 1 piece of equipment in those 5 days after. It's the same principle as Eric proposed earlier when it comes to trails. You see the sidewalks, you'll see the trails. You can see them red to show P1s, P2 sidewalks also, P1s and P2s, priority 1s and 2s. Yes, as you can see, the trails and sidewalks are in the same map. Some we will remove the snow, some sidewalks we won't. So it's more convenient for people who are walking to know which side of the street they should take and where the snow will be removed. I was talking about adopting a fire hydrant earlier. This program has been in existence for a few years, and it really helps us to adopt a fire hydrant. It helps people in the region also. You can adopt a fire hydrant individually or with your neighbors. And what it involves is that every time there's snow that falls, you remove the snow. You clean it up. For us, it's really useful because we have 1,400 of those to clear up. And if something happens to you, then it helps the residents too. And don't worry, if you go on vacation down south, don't worry about it. If we go by, it's not done, we'll clean it up, so have a good trip. All this information is available on our website, dieppe.ca. In this document, which will be posted tomorrow on the website, our snow removal plan. It's a 7-page document. It's really a synopsis. We've put a few things in there to help things so that residents know what's going on. And there's some smaller icons. Don't park overnight on city streets. Don't put snow coming from your driveway on the street or sidewalk. Often we get complaints and we clean up and people have no place to put the snow. They put it on the sidewalk. We have to come back with our tractor. So things like don't park in your driveway so that you'll block the equipment. We agree that those have a driveway and we see the sidewalk, sometimes the cars are right on especially if they're white, it could be a little bit more difficult. Avoid to spin your tires at intersections. Sometimes we have no choice, the car doesn't move forward, but what it does is that will compact the snow. It packs the snow and it becomes even slipper. So those will come behind you and they'll slide even more. to help our team, something is to adopt a fire hydrant and put trash in a place where they won't stop our snow removal operations. Because in the spring, you know, we might cut a bag in half and like right now, you know, there's been some snow, there's snow. You know, you can clean up the sewer drains so that the water will drain down and put the snow to the right when you're facing the street. This will help. These are just pieces of advice. Put the snow to the right of your driveway when you clean up. So that's what we had. That's our presentation. It wasn't supposed to snow during my presentation, but yeah. If you have any questions from council members? Mr. Godet followed. Thank you. In terms of Industrial Street, it won't change its status in view of the fact that there's an entrance from Route 15 that we looked at this year. You don't consider this as a corridor or a main street. Well, it could be next year, but not this year. Because I notice on your map, it doesn't even show that street. Right. We still treat it. It's not there, but we still treat it as a P2, priority 2. We put salt and sand, and we maintain it like any other P2s. All right, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. 2 questions. First one. When we look at the map, do we remove the snow of the streets that go in the greater Lakeburn area? Yeah. Well, when we look at Melanson, it keeps going, and then it connects to Arsenault. Yeah, Melanson, Arsenault. Yep, that section is not done. There's 2 colors. There's dark gray, light gray, right? Those are our limits. These are the limits. All right. We don't do dark gray. I'm sorry. Dark gray, we don't do them. No, that's right. That's right. Okay. Now for streets, designated provincial streets in the city. Yes. Do we get any compensation? Yes, we receive compensation, not just for snow removal, but also for the lines, asphalt, if there are any repairs. So there's a formula. Right. Thank you. Thank you. That's it, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Thibodeau. I see no further questions. I have one. Mr. Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to go back to a detail that you mentioned in cul-de-sacs. Yes, I know in my area, yeah, I've had a lot of complaints last year. It's quite a headache, and from what I understood from your presentation is when the truck comes by, it will share the snow with all the neighbors there in the area, right? That's right. Well, when it gets and enters the street, it takes it full width and it goes around. And what's left in the center, then you go on the other side and you pile it up in the center. Otherwise, if we don't pile it up in the center, it'll go in the middle and it'll just move it right to do a trail. Right. So there's a trail. All right. Thank you. Because I just want to make sure that people understand fully that these cul-de-sacs, this is not done voluntarily, you know, that the driver will drag the snow to one neighbor instead of another. It's equally shared. Right. When there's a big snowstorm, we have to expect that this snow has to be removed, has to be transported elsewhere, at least to clear the streets. Right? All right. Thank you. It's not an exact science. It depends on the operator and visibility, etc. So sometimes a resident may have a little bit more than the other one or at the last, compared to the last storm. So we try to do our best. And we try to do this as equally as possible. All right. Thank you. Thank you. It seems a few years back, we encouraged people talking about adopting a fire hydrant. We encourage people also to take a picture of their efforts and post this on social media or on the city's website, right? Our Facebook page. So this encouraged others to do an effort to contribute to the community. It's just a suggestion when we talk about this as a community effort. All right, if there are no further questions, thank you, gentlemen, and have a pleasant winter. I wish it to all, to us all. So now the presentation for the downtown design guidelines. Stéphanie Rocher, Jean-François Vien, good evening. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. Stéphanie Rocher, I'm a city planner. I'm with Jean-François, who's behind me. Our mandate at the beginning of the year to produce a guide for downtown Dieppe. We wanted that the downtown has a full guideline to suggest some planning ideas. So here what I'll present is to dream. It's not something that'll be done next year or that you'll have in your plan. This is more of a 15 or 20-year vision, so we can all dream a bit. So in fact, these concepts will give you some guidelines, and following those, what you might find interesting, there are more specific studies that can be undertaken over time. So this evening, I want to give you an overview of what could be coming without this unfolding exactly like this. So our goals for this mandate was to improve the quality of life in the downtown area, to make this area walkable, so safe for pedestrians, so that this be connected, viable, and cultural and greener. When it comes to sustainable development, you already have a lot of work done. And we want to improve the image of downtown to reinforce and make this more attractive, the more attractive downtown, to welcome development that be as optimal as possible. So, as I said, our mandate started at the beginning of the year 2018, but before we arrived, many interventions took place thanks to the city. Since 2016, there were consultations and surveys done with the general population to know what's their downtown vision, what they would like to see in the downtown area. And following this, there was a main plan for downtown that was drafted by WSP firm. That was done in June 2017. So really, we started from that work to produce this guide. So we didn't start from square one. We took what the population had said and what the studies demonstrated, and the vision when it comes to WSP's global vision to continue our work. We've thought about this more specifically to some interventions. We've continued with our studies. Well, we visited Dieppe and we came back to work with various municipal services, engineering, recreations, economic development, to test some concepts and look at what worked well, what didn't work so well, and push on a few ideas to finally have this guide, which I'm presenting tonight. So as I said, there are more specific studies that could unfold from this. Generally speaking, and here I'll go this quickly because I talk about this for hours, but I just want to point out priority points. What we see in pink, all the lands, this is land that potentially where there are some buildings, mind you, one-story buildings, or buildings that have been identified that have a lot of potential to go to be much higher, to be 3, 4, 5 stories high. A dynamic center like we want, we need people living here, so we have to bring people to the downtown area because really they're the ones that will go to businesses, go to restaurants around here. So one of the priority is to offer housing. Another element, one of the key points in our concepts is on Paul Street and College Street, you see in turquoise, you see these arrows to continue with these streets that would reduce traffic on Acadie and Champlain. And right now there's a lot of traffic, a lot of cars, so by having these streets, this would give more room to pedestrians and reduce traffic as much as possible. And another intervention that's fairly strong is having a park near the Petitcodiac River here, where we could connect downtown through Virginia Street to that park. So these are the few ideas. I think you already have this presentation in hand. You'll be able to read it in the future. And I think this is online for the general public also. So more specifically, we talk about rethinking 5 main streets in the downtown area. These streets were always designed to give more room to pedestrians for their safety, to reduce the speed of traffic, so that it'd be more comfortable to travel either, in these areas. And what we said, 95% of people travel by car. In Dieppe, we want to change that trend to encourage people to travel on foot, because, as I said, a dynamic downtown, you need people to walk around the downtown area and live in the downtown area. As I said, Champlain Street, that's what's happening right now. One thing that we realize is very wide, 4 lanes. This is a main street, a provincial one. We don't want to reduce the importance of that throughway, but we want to make travel easier for pedestrians, yes, by the fact that we would reduce traffic slightly. So we could have a wider sidewalk on the northern side to put, trees, etc. That's one of the interventions that we are suggesting. Another intervention would be here at the intersection. City Hall is here. We have Acadie and Champlain. And that intersection, those 2 intersections, the 2 most important streets, would be, there could be a roundabout, and that's one of the entry to the city. So to really have this roundabout so that cars know they're in a new environment, a more urban area. So we would have a roundabout where within this one we could have, we could have landscaping, and this would send a strong message in the downtown area of the urban planning in those 2 main streets.
So you see all the number 5s here. There's small buildings to create density with mixed usage, commercial usage, to have commercial continuity. And it could look like this. If you can see here, this is Acadie Champlain streets. And we would have wider sidewalks with vegetation, trees, and the lanes would be a little narrower. And we would integrate new buildings where there would be parking, vacant lots, that we would create commercial continuity on the first floor. And here we could integrate decks. And it could be more dynamic in the downtown. So that would be interesting. On Acadie Avenue, we had about the same thoughts as with Champlain. It's difficult for pedestrians. There are a lot of cars. The street is very wide. There's a lot of noise as well. And there's architecture, different heights. and signs for the cars that go by. So we propose with bypass streets on Paul Street, we could have only 2 lanes, and then we could have parallel parking as well. The more that we build, we take away parking, and so we would add it on the street. And then cars would have to slow down in this case. And we would densify the surrounding areas, and the intersections would become safer as well. We propose here on Acadie and the market here to enlarge the public market. So it's a project that you have already on Acadie Street. If you don't know Dieppe, we don't know there's a public market, so it's very important for the city. And it would be a window on Acadie Street with a facade in a public place where people could eat and people could bring their fruits and vegetables out during the summer. And so this is what it could look like. City Hall is here on the south. Acadie would have 2 lanes and parking on the street. We would widen the sidewalks and add plants and trees. And the guide follows the guidelines, general guidelines. And here is the City Hall again. And here, crosswalks with a bit islands, so they're very large, and that could connect sections between them. So we could create safe crosswalks, and that would be very interesting. On Marché Street, it's a small intervention here. The street is already nice the way it is. We have new buildings that are interesting, and what we propose is to put urban furniture here for an intergenerational complex that will be ready in 2020. And so this would be different in the downtown, and people could go towards the north to this intergenerational complex. Here's a plan, and our intervention here would be to connect Gauvin Est to Market Street. And Virginia would be a complete street. And we could have a cycling lane here and for pedestrians as well. So it would join other cycling paths with a multifunctional, multi-purposed lane. So on Gauvin Street, between Acadie and Marché Street, this is a bit of a barrier, an obstacle between the public market and 1604 Place. There's very little traffic, vehicle traffic here at the moment, and there's parking on the left. So we proposed a planning tactic here, to put a temporary development here, like an urban laboratory to test planning. So we would like to close the street temporarily for maybe a week or maybe a whole season, and develop it different ways. So it could look like this. We could integrate things that we could remove, sports equipment, for instance, basketball or a giant chess game. containers as well that could serve as benches. And we could eat here. We see this more and more often around the world. So that's an idea of what it could look like. It could test the closing of this street to vehicular traffic to have 200, 300, 400 people for events. And then they wouldn't take their cars here. It could look like this. And last weekend, the street was closed for an event with Yuppie, who came to Dieppe, and it went very well. So it would be in that vein. If it works, in 15 or 20 years, this street would be closed permanently. And we could have plants, urban furniture, small buildings as well, small structures, decks. And Virginia Street, it's the same thing here as Market Street. It's a small part of the street that goes to the Petitcodiac River. It's an important link. And right now it's a residential street, and it will stay that way. But we could use this for people to go from downtown to Petitcodiac River. So it could look like this. It would follow the trajectory of the Petitcodiac River. So here's for the development of the streets. I'm going to talk about two specific sectors that we want to develop. One, which was already identified in WSP, and that's Gauvin, an island in on Gauvin Street from the market du Collège at Champlain. So we identify this sector as an island in the center of the downtown. So these are lots that have a lot of potential to bring a lot more people into the downtown. So we propose to integrate more dynamics in the island to create a new street in the center. And it could have a little curve. And a secondary street that would be created to give access to the parking. And a garage as well with a few stories could be here for this sector, and a public place for people to socialize. So this is the development that we propose from Champlain Street towards Gauvin Street, with the buildings here, with contemporary architecture, and we could have a lot of vegetation as well. The last part would be on Virginie Street, which would have a lot of potential, the development of Petitcodiac River. The town has its back to the river right now, but there's a lot of potential for development in that sector. Moncton does it a bit, but Dieppe has very little development there, so it would be integrating paths that would be near the river. So here we're at the elbow. There are very nice points of view. We could see Moncton, the river. We could have observation towers, and we could have furniture for people to rest. And these trails could be linked up to the Acadian Monument at the entrance of the city, and this would be a bypass of the 4 lanes that would connect Virginia, and we would have 2 entrances here that we propose. This building is for treatment of wastewater. So here are pictures of things we could put into the park. With lighting, it would be very interesting. We could have furniture, street furniture, that could be integrated to rest. And here are elements that would retell the history of Dieppe and the river, and a lot of informative elements that we could integrate as well. So this concludes my presentation. There's a lot of more elements in the document, but I don't want to take too much of your time. So I invite you to read it, and thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors? No. Therefore, thank you for your presentation. Madame Le Boutier has a question. Thank you. During your presentation on Acadie Street, you suggest to transfer to 2 lanes. We looked at traffic. That would be in the case where there would be a bypass on Paul Street, and that would be possible to have a street with 2 lanes, because there's a lot of traffic on Acadie Street. But with a bypass on Paul Street, it could be possible to have these 2 lanes. Thank you. Any other question from councillors? Councillor Gaudette. Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to know, what are the next steps after this presentation? Secondly, what are, with respect to the information we give to the public, there's a lot of information here, visual, it's a lot. Perhaps we could publish a document for the public and put it in Dieppe Mag as a special edition for the future of the downtown. Where are we going with this proposal? This is a tool for management, or is it a detailed instrument for the future? Mr. Frenet. Mr. Gaudette, the intention is to share this information at the next meeting, as we did with WSP, was before council, for that the council accept the document. So in the future, this is a vision, and what is good about it, when we have training, developers talk to us, and it's important for the city to have a vision. We want to invest in the downtown, and people who want to invest in downtown, it's important for them to know what our vision is. The municipality commits itself to respect this vision. Now, we have worked a lot with Expansion Dieppe, and they've had a lot to say about it, about this process, assessment of the document. We've had different phases of analysis, and they worked with His Worship and the councillors. And we have a meeting with co-conception. So this is an internal document that we will use, and as well Expansion Dieppe will use it too. and investors in the downtown. So the next steps, of course, this is a plan that we presented. Phase 1 with WSP with recommendations. That's the main document. And the interventions or the guide for development is a part of the interventions. And we followed certain recommendations of WSP. We'll have certain interventions as council will make the decisions. And we talked about the urban tactics on Gauvin Street between 1604 Place and the market. And we'll take advantage of the public spaces to have these links for people that come into the area. We have 2 major events coming up. The Congrès Mondial Acadien and the Jeux de la Francophonie, so we would like to work on these places. And there's other sectors in the municipalities where engineering services know that there'll be interventions in the future. So we're going to study this guide to see if we can integrate some of these propositions. And the River Park, of course, is a part of the strategic plan of the council, respecting tourism and urban planning. And it's a place we're going to work much more in detail. That's a part of our goals. As I said, this is a document, a vision, and for us it's very important and takes into value the downtown. And we have interventions as well. And Madame Rocher presented the island on Gauvin Street. We already have interventions, and there's a north-south axis that we have identified, and council has put money aside for development there. So we're already doing some of this. Of course, we can't do everything, but I think we'll have to make choices in the future, and it'll be very interesting. With this document, we'll be able to position ourselves better. And we extension of Paul Street too, eventually, a bypass road, which would be interesting. We already have 4 lanes downtown, and on Acadie Street, we could add parking. So we would increase parking there and maybe close part of the street on Gauvin Street permanently. And in these bypass streets, we're already working on that on the extension of College Street. So there are already places we're already working on this. There are interventions being done. I hope it answers your question. The discussion on Gauvin Island, we've been talking about it for 18 months or more. And I know that people from Expansion Dieppe, when they meet developers, they present these options. And we get positive feedback from developers when they come to discuss this with us, because they see that we have a future plan for development of downtown. We have a community here in the community to build the future, how we want to see our city. We don't have massive buildings already there that could interfere with development, so we have a great opportunity. You were there in the beginning of the development of the downtown Councillor Godet. And when you see all the houses that we've bought on Gauvin Street, that was the beginning. And it's good to have options and to look at them, all these aspects of development. And the community aspect as well. So it's a great opportunity. I could talk about it for hours. Thank you, Madame Rocher, for your presentation. No other questions? We shall continue. Thank you for this excellent presentation. Now, 7.5 presentation, motor vehicle traffic on Chartersville Road, based on the interventions that we've done. Good evening, Ms. Spencer. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors, and members of the public. At the meeting on October 9th, we had a petition presented to council with respect to residents on Chartersville Road. Our engineering team looked at these requests, accepting excessive noise. And Mathieu Melançon, my colleague, we've compiled the information and we'll present it, and both of us will be here to answer your questions. So my colleague will present. This is baptism of fire. Good evening. I would like to explain this petition for Chartersville Road. We have put three-way stops on Fortune, or they've asked for three-way stops of Fortune and Bourg, and crosswalks at Rideau, Alberta, Fortune and Bourg. So we studied it to see what we could do. Firstly, the policy of the municipality to limit the speed, the first criteria is that there be 60% of homes on a residential street or collector street be in agreement. So, and the second criteria is that is to determine, to see if there's a speeding problem in the region. So 85% must indicate that the excess of the speed is more than 10 kilometers per hour. And there be 1,000 vehicles per day on residential streets or 8,000 on the collector streets. So these 8,000 vehicles have diminished this criteria to 5,000 per day. And once that has been determined, what the recommendations are to be put into place to limit the speed on the street. So after this study, we evaluated the speed, 85%. There was a speeding of more than 66 kilometers in a 50 limit zone, and there were 6,900 vehicles per day. And this was when Harrisville Bridge was closed. It was really high, but it wasn't really excessive for a collector street in the city. So before we do anything on the street, is to reinforce the law and to explain to the public what the speed limits are and what we should do. So the next here is we've done this for an education program for the public. Your Worship, councillors, just to give you a resume of our campaign of education that we've done, is to prevent speeding. We started August 31st, and we had media coverage. We were present in the newspapers, TV, radio, and we had a campaign on social media, and we reached about 40,000 users, a lot of commitment, comments, reaction, and a lot of sharing. Our statistics show that it's unusual, the success we receive, especially for this kind of campaign to change behavior. Not so many people are committed, so it's a great success for us. Respecting our statistics. So we added a panel on Acadie and Champlain Street. It's impossible to determine the number of people that we reached with this sign, but it was a very busy intersection, so we think it was seen at least once a day by all residents of the city of Dieppe. As well, we added panels in different sectors in the city during 2 months. It's difficult to determine, to see if it was there was an impact on drivers. But it couldn't do any harm, and we'll have a second phase for this campaign in the spring. So we'll reactivate the same campaign. And I will give the mic to Mathieu now. In the same context of this presentation that was done by Eric on snow removal, I'm going to present the classification of municipal streets. So you see in red we have the arterial streets, and in blue we have collector streets. They're busy, the residential streets that go to arteries, but there are streets where we'll have a lot of traffic and speeding can be higher, but these streets can accommodate traffic, and we don't want to avoid that people use these streets or that they use collector streets. With a three-way stop sign, it can be used to reduce speed, but generally the effects are only measured at the stop, when you arrive at the stop and leaving it directly. And then if a stop is not justified without having enough traffic, people start speeding up again between these stops to catch up the time they stopped at the stop. And if the stop is not necessary, with respecting safety at this intersection, they stop respecting the stop sign and they just go right through if there aren't any cars at the intersection.
They understand that there's no risk at that intersection. So it's not a reason not to use a three-way sign to reduce speed. In terms of justifying a three-way speed, there are three criteria that must be met. First of all, there's at least 200 vehicles per hour for an 8-hour period, and there's more than 30 seconds per vehicle in the busiest time in the secondary street. Or, third point, another consideration we may use, if there's more than 5 or more accidents reported within a year, it shows there's a problem at that intersection and something should be done to remedy this situation. So on a three-way stop, in our studies on Fortin Street, the timeline was 5.8 seconds. It doesn't quite meet the 30-second minimum. On average, there was about 34 vehicles per hour for 416 vehicles in a 12-hour period. Again, it didn't meet the minimum criteria. For Bourke Street, it's the same, 5.8 seconds. And the highest traffic was 89 cars per hour, but there's not enough volume to need a three-way stop. Excuse me. So This requires that there's 15 pedestrians over a 1 hour period to have a pedestrian crosswalk, and less than 120 an opportunity to cross the street. This is 15 seconds to have an opportunity to cross between vehicles so that a person has the chance to cross the street. And based on this survey, the minimum should be 15 pedestrians per hour for a 7-hour period, except the city of Dieppe, we said it would be necessary in a 1 hour period. Otherwise, there's probably there would be no sidewalks anywhere in the city. So the pedestrian crosswalk on Rideau Street, there were 2 people who tried to cross the street per hour. At the pedestrian crosswalk, at Alberta Street, there's 8 people in the busiest time period in the evening on Alberta Street. Yep. At Fortune Street, we didn't do a complete assessment on that intersection because on the other side of Fortune and Chartersville, there's no destination to Fortune. There's no sidewalk. There are no walking paths. There's no specific destination. So put a pedestrian crosswalk, people would end up in a person's driveway instead of bringing them elsewhere. And at Bourque Street, we analyzed this, and there was only 4 people who tried to cross the street. And as I've mentioned, for signage in terms of trucking on Chartersville, we recommend that we put signs on the secondary road visible from the main street. So in our case, as you can see, that's the sign that's right next to Femmes Prix on Chartersville, so it's visible for trucking going on Amiro. And we also have signs on Bourque Street and Pascal Street. They're not necessarily recommended, but these are additions that the municipality did to make sure there's no trucking in that area. So I'll show you various measures to slow down traffic that we've considered because it's a collector street in this area. We analyzed what would be acceptable in that case. So you see here, it's not that there's a speed reduction, but this is not useful for emergency vehicles for snow removal, maintenance in the region. And again, it's very noisy with the stops that people do if they go too fast. They have to slow down to those speed bumps. And in the municipalities, we have on Gauvin Street in school areas, we have these speed bumps. Those speed bumps here, as you can see, it's a speed bump, but there's a little bit of space between them. This is designed so that big trucks, fire trucks, can go in between those two. So it's less inconvenient for them, but ambulances still have the same issues. It reduces speed, it reduces conflicts, but it's still a problem for maintenance, pedestrian, and snow removal between these speed bumps. Another option would be a higher intersection. It's a bit like a speed bump. It's just wider. It would be on the whole intersection. It slows down traffic and speed, but for emergency services, that can be an obstacle. Another aspect is to paint speed limits on the street. This gives the driver the impression that, well, yeah, he can really see the maximum speed. It's a good way to reduce speed, but it requires extra work for public works to maintain these. We also we can put a sign. In the past, we put these signs at the crosswalks because it would be on the yellow line. Again, to post what is the speed that people have to follow, and it limits the width of the road, so people tend to slow down a little bit more. And there's also the speed indicator. It's something that's those speed signs reduce speed, driver speed. And here we see this when, there's batteries that we have to charge them every few days. So it's a bit of maintenance, but at least people, they can visually see the speed they're traveling at compared to what they should be. So what we propose on that section for next year to put up the speed indicator on a permanent basis at Fortune Street, and also put tubes so we can measure what was the impact of putting up these speed signs compared to the regular speeds. As you could see, the 85 percentile on Charleville's is about 66 kilometers, that's the average, and with the speed indicator, it went down to 61 kilometers. So we could observe a speed reduction of 5 kilometers. We also suggest to put a second crosswalk. Right now there's a crosswalk at the intersection of Central Street, and there's one at Horizon, but there's nothing in between. So we would suggest to put a pedestrian crosswalk at Alberta intersection. Since the speed limits have changed with the Malenfant School, we think there are more pedestrians that will come on Fortune Street, and they would try to cross the street. And right now, Chartersville is a road that's fairly busy. So without a crosswalk, I don't think people will feel safe to cross. So we propose to try this for the next year to see how this will work. The only issue with this is right now we're getting snow earlier than what we expected, so we won't be able to paint this right away. But once this pedestrian crosswalk is installed, we want also to put signage on the crosswalk that would really reduce speed, and that seems to work elsewhere on Melançon and Centrale, Vanier, and Charlottesville also. Those signs work really well, and it had a good impact to slow down traffic. So if all this unfolds, and we still have some issues, another option is to put these central signs at strategic places, again, to try to reduce speed and paint possibly the speed limit on the road. Well, that's about it. Thank you. Questions from council? Mr. Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. My question is when it comes to speed bumps. I know there's maintenance required. I know it slows down traffic. That's the goal, right? To slow down traffic. Indeed. We have this on Gold Street. It's also present on Gauvin Street. In my opinion, it works. When we do these studies, there was an article that stated at least cars who travel on those streets, they reduce their speed by about 40% because of speed bumps, because it may damage the car. I've done it myself, you know, go on Gauvin and forget there's one, and I went a little bit too fast, and it's not good for your car. So, even though it slows down traffic because there's no speed, or rather, it's not a speed issue, but it's rather there's not too much traffic on Charlesville or on Vanier. There's not too much traffic on Central Street. I don't see lines and cars lined up. So why can't we look at those facilities? Because it's proven that it works. I think one of the issues with these speed bumps is that it becomes an inconvenient, as we said in the beginning of our presentation, in terms of the road network. If we put too many physical inconvenience initially, people will try to go around them. In the case of Gauvin, once you're on Gauvin, there's no way to go around to get elsewhere. But let's say, look at this map between Bourque and Thomas. We could easily turn on Fortune and go through a subdivision. This would be a shortcut and send traffic on secondary roads. In terms of speed reduction, we can see exactly where, we can see that speed is reduced at the speed bump, but not before or after. So people don't tend to slow down throughout the road, everywhere on the road. Do you really think that people will take side roads to avoid a speed bump? Really? If you allow me to add, and I think you've mentioned this, Mathieu, but the only place we have there are in school zones, and it's at pedestrian crosswalk there higher to ensure the safety of students. As we've mentioned, when it comes to snow removal, it's really an issue. They're very careful because we have 3 in the city, but nonetheless, it's quite an inconvenient for snow removal and for emergency vehicles and public transit. So I know I've had discussions with Mr. Richard about this. So obviously, as you can see, based on our presentation, we try various measures to avoid this. I agree with you, it works, but there are many inconveniences that come with this, so we're trying other things to see if it could work before we try that. I admit we can try, but at one point we have to say, well, this is not working. Vanier Street, I remember Vanier, we've done all sorts of things to try to slow down traffic. We put panels, signs that show you your speed that's flashing. But again, today, speed is taking place. So personally, I'm convinced that we need an obstacle of sorts, like speed bumps, because speed bumps in some cities, they place them in the summer, and in November, they remove them.
C'est pas une question que c'est impossible.
It's not that it's impossible. That can be removed. And it doesn't bother trucks in the wintertime or for snow removal. Anyways, I would like us to consider further the usage of speed bumps. It's difficult to argue with 3-way stops, but many municipalities have 3-way stops. We have some in town. We have one on Gauvin Street. But speed bumps, in my opinion, that seems to be a formula that could work. And perhaps we should try it at a few places in town. Try them. I appreciate your comments, Councillor Gadet. If we were to try it, I would recommend that we go with these cushions that slow down traffic, so that those speed bumps where emergency vehicles can avoid go around those smaller bumps. And I forgot my train of thought. Oh, yeah. Right, sorry. Those are fairly close or wide. The regular vehicle can't go around both bumps. The spacing between the wheels is wide enough for bigger vehicles, but regular vehicles will still have to go on those bumps. I remember what I was going to say. So for 3-way stops, for instance, as professionals, we have an ethical code, we have a professional code. We don't recommend those, but if council wants to put them up, that would be your choice. Thank you, Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. There's one thing that I find odd. The sign to stop trucking. Because if it's on Chartersville, the truck is already turning or turned already. So what does the trucker do? He has to continue. So it seems to me it's not logical to have those signs on the street, on the secondary street. There should be a sign saying it's forbidden to turn for trucks, for instance. It follows the standards. I know Mrs. Geneviève mentioned that some truckers mentioned that the signs were too far, but I agree that most truckers are aware that it's not a road where trucks are allowed, so I think it's maybe an excuse, but that's my personal opinion. Inaudible comments, apologies from the booth. Microphone, please. Inaudible comments, microphone, please. Apologies from the interpretation booth. The lady speaking is not using a microphone. Apologies.
No,
Nonetheless, there are some standards that we have to meet. and follow some rules, national ones that we must follow. As was mentioned already by Mrs. Spencer, if council wants to go against those rules, if there's something that happens, the municipality will have to assume the legal consequences. So that will be a council decision if you want to continue, or unless you were done, Mr. Thibodeau. No, I had another point. Mrs. Gionet, during your presentation, she talked about biking trails or biking paths on the side of the road. And I wonder if we can put both cycling paths on the same side of the road so we'd have the same type of space for cars. So I was wondering simply, did we examine that issue? In that case, it wouldn't be recommended because you would have cars where the people who are on the bike would go against traffic. Nonetheless, you have the same width. It would be moved on the same side. Nonetheless, ideally, we would have a road completely outside the street. So we would have to rebuild Charter Street. So, of course, when we rebuild it, then we'll consider that option. But right now, it's designed based on standards, and it's on each side that's ideal. Because if we put it on the same side, we could also put a divider, to prevent cars to drive on that biking path. All right, well, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Leblanc. No, sorry, Mr. Cormier. The other Leblanc, right, the other Leblanc, Mr. Cormier. All right. I'm very aware of the speed issue because if I could give a fine to every car that's speeding and keep the money, I could retire a lot younger than I'll be able to do so. My point before we put speed bumps, I think we should consult, especially ambulance drivers, because I live at the bottom of Chartersville, and I can tell you, ambulances, they go up Chartersville. Very often they go up Chartersville, and I'm not sure I would want to be the patient that's going to the hospital with speed bumps. It's just a comment. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else from council? Mrs. Debussy. Thank you, Your Worship. 2 points, and of course, speed bumps, I don't know the whole issue, all the measures, but recently I was in Winnipeg. Every secondary arterial, there are speed bumps, but there are speed bumps back to back every 500 meters just to really slow down. And they have the same amount of snow that we get in Pierrefonds. Again, they have speed bumps, not just one, but it seems to me is a different equipment that they use because they should have the same challenges that we would face, right? And of course, it can slow down traffic. I can reassure you on Gauvin Street with speed bumps, I'm careful. Certainly, I'm careful. At the bottom of Chartersville, where you put that sign, I can also tell you with the road, it wakes people up. It makes all the difference. Now, as to your proposal, when we're driving on Chartersville, because I live nearby, already we have both sides of the road. They're already painted. We have signs where we can't park. There are some signs a little further on. There's a lot of signage. And again, to put more like maximum 50, I don't know if that would be really effective. But perhaps we should try it to see if it would work. You're talking about in the middle of, you're talking about painting. I'm talking about painting, what you're proposing, their second idea, because the sign is a physical obstacle in the middle of the road. People tend to slow down, but maybe for the paint job on the road, maybe that's too much. Now, for speed bumps, when we built them on Gauvin Street, it was about $10,000 per speed bumps. It seems easy, but it's asphalt. We have to to work on sidewalks on each side, and we need to collect the water because there's like a barrier in the middle of the street with this bump. So you need it costs about $10,000 per speed bump, just for your information. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Any other comments from council members? Otherwise, I thank you for your presentation. Oh, yes, you can move forward, please, and identify yourself. I'm sorry. If you wish, please come to the microphone, identify yourself for the record. I think you know me, Sharon Genet. Yes, yes, good evening. I just want, it seems to me, it's like 5 years ago. I've made the same request. Nothing was done. The other day, for instance, I come out of my driveway. There's a car. Well, it's like a Ford 150 following me. He was right behind me. I couldn't even see his lights. I moved aside to let him pass me, and then I followed. Then I followed him. But he was going at between 75 to 80 kilometers an hour. That's just the other day. Because the flashing light wasn't working on weekends. You know that you had at the end of Fortune Street. But this evening, before coming here, I could hear cars driving by. It was like, it doesn't make any sense, the speed. I know you don't live on our street except His Worship. Oh, yes, and Mr. Comey also, right. But something has to be done. We have to have pedestrian crosswalk because children go to school. With my petition, people told me they live just on the other side of Rideau Street, and they are afraid when people go to school. They cross the road, drive there at high speed. And in my opinion, the average speeds on Chartersville is about 70 kilometers. That's the average speed. And you saw the results that were measured 66 kilometers an hour. Yes, but I saw that. I was driving. I could see them. There were some that were going at 67, 70. By the time they got to Fortune Street, they were driving at 52. They reduced their speed to 52 kilometers. So I was often in that area. So it's just because we did this 5 years ago between Bonaventure and Bourque Streets. They've done this twice. And then it worsened afterwards. Cars travel on Chartersville at high speeds. It's as though, I'm driving at the back at Fred Léger, and it looks like there's a highway next to us. We hear cars driving by. When I'm on the other side, on the other road, I can still hear cars. So it doesn't make any sense, We have to do something. We have new residents, younger ones, like when we arrived there with our children. Now we're seeing this again, new families, because of the school. So we have to do something. If something happens, you will be responsible. That's all I have to say. So thank you. I hope that something will be done, and something will be done to slow down traffic, because it does not make any sense. That's why I'm so angry, because for 41 years I've been living there, and 5 years ago I asked the same thing I'm asking tonight, and nothing was done. And it's as though there's no consideration for those residents on our street. So it's just me tonight, but thank you for your comments. We'll continue to try. Well, something has to be done. There are things that were recommended and suggested, so we'll move forward with this issue. But no decision will be taken here tonight, obviously. Can I make a suggestion? The pit, the little sign that you had in the middle of the road, Right, that little sign that you had in the middle of the road. If we have cycling paths on each side, that's why I said, don't put it there. Your car is not that big. Well, the cars I've seen were driving right on the cycling path, so I don't know. Perhaps, yeah, it's possible. Maybe they're afraid to hit the signs. Yeah. So if we could put the cycling path on one side, as I saw in other cities in the past, and you go east-west together, at least you don't have to check both sides of the street, so it's for cars. Anyways, thank you very much. I know I'm angry, but it's been a while that this has been lasting too long, and something has to be done. Can I make some comments after Mrs. Genet's comments? Absolutely. You're asking what we're proposing? We propose to put a pedestrian crosswalk at Alberta Street, so people will have two options. Go to Thomas Street or Alberta Street, so people who live on the other side, they'll have two options. And also for signage, you mentioned they don't work over the weekend, as Mathieu mentioned. These are rechargeable batteries, so what we're proposing to install would have solar panels, so that situation should not arise. And the last point, I know you've made the same request many years ago. The same analysis were done when it comes to, a three-way stop and a pedestrian crosswalk. So it's not to take place now just like then, but I agree there's a lot of speeding, and your point when it comes to our responsibility, yes, we can put measures in place, but people nonetheless have the responsibility to follow speed limits. That's all I want to add. Thank you. That's it for presentations. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Le Breton, if you allow me. Today, when I told you we did some enforcement on Charlersville, was one of the streets where we were present for more than an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I can tell you, about 100 cars that went by in that time, they were a bit above the speed limit. There was only one car that was going 20 kilometers over the speed limit, and that was today. I can tell you, sometimes people's perception is that cars go faster than they actually are going. And sometimes, yes, some people go beyond the speed limit. I can tell you that's in any community. There's always some people that will speed. But the solution for me, if you're asking me, that we do this at every street, we put, stop signs, people will still do so. I think the real solution is education, to educate and make the people aware that speed can cause accidents, can injure people, and it's up to the population to slow down. The solution is slowing down, but there's always someone that's late. There's always someone that has to go from A to B, and they'll speed. Is it always the same people? No. It can happen once. It'll be one individual. They'll be late for an appointment, for instance. These people will speed. But all in all, it's the population as a whole that has to work together and reduce speed in our community streets.
So that's my 2 cents with your worship. So today the average was a little bit above 50 kilometers per hour. That's your observation. Thank you. Now we'll go to questions by members of the public, and I don't see any questions. So we'll go to the adoption of minutes of November 13th, moved by Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Leboutillier. With the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The minutes of November 13th is adopted. Item number 10, motions, memorandums, and nominations. Maybe before we start, this is an item that's a bit heavy. Perhaps we could take a 5-minute break. Thank you. We're back. Good evening. We shall continue with item number 10.1, culture, leisure, and community life. And we're going to talk about the adoption of policy L1 2018, tariffication. Rental rates for facilities and municipal spaces. Good evening, colleagues, members of the public. So I'm going to take your time tonight, and this is very important for our youth groups for planning. Soon we'll have policies on rental rates. They'll be finished in the next season or 2019. I want to simplify it a bit for you. It's a long policy, and we've had quite an exercise. We consolidated all the rental rates in one policy because right now we have different policies. Last year, if you remember, I did a lot of work on policy L8 on spaces and municipal installations, facilities with recreational facilities. We're working with this, with Aquatic Center, and we've had renovations there as well. We tried to find a procedure and steps to take that would be coherent for all these facilities to be easier for everybody, and it would be equal everywhere as well. So we're talking about L1, L2, L3, arenas, sports fields, aquatic center. Well, they'll all be in this policy starting in May of next year. For all the rental rates, we'll have the same steps. So all the tables that I'll give you PowerPoint and pages in the policy to make it easy for you. We have a market study done with cities, neighboring cities, and we've had different structural options. Some of them are more interesting in other municipalities, and we get inspired by them. There's one which we have amended, so it'll facilitate your work. We have an internal committee for these discussions. I do the research, and we study them in teams. We have discussions with leisure services and recreation, and financial services as well. Firstly, on page 148, Schedule A, it's the biggest. Soon we'll have a new complex. So for the next ice rink season, right now we're in 2018-19, that's already established. But for the following seasons, we propose an increase of 2%, the inflation rate that was recommended. In 2021, we have a recommendation to consolidate all the rental rates for the Olympic services. A Centennial, we have 3 ice surfaces, and the complex, it's a quality that will be put up to a level so that everything can be equal. We don't want to increase it for 2021, but we want to have rates that are equal for all of them. If you rent ice at the new complex or elsewhere, it will still be the same. Then we'll have the 2021-22 season with an increase of 5%, which is recommended. According to the research we've done, we're still lower than our neighboring cities, and we're competing with other cities that are similar to us. We have looked at that, I assure you. I don't know if you want to ask questions as I go through this, or at the end. We'll go with questions. Councillor Alain. If I do the math, we have an increase of 2% in 2020, and in 2021, we'll have an increase of 7%. For the Olympic surface, 0 increase. But for Saint-Anselme to join the Olympic one, it would be an increase of 7%. Centennial Arena, there's a difference between these 2 rates. If we have one that's higher than the other, when you increase it of 2%, it's higher in one and lower in the other. So there's been a gap over the years. So it will affect 2 youth groups that use these services, and 2 out of 4 don't use them at all. Any other questions? We continue. The next table on page 145, Schedule B in your documents. It's for the rental rates for arenas without ice when it's concrete during festival times. There's no increase for that. Our rates are higher than other municipalities, so we have no increase, but we've developed a new rate for the events inside the arenas. Beforehand, we didn't have special rates for the stage curtains that had to be installed, but we have requests now for events, for shows. We have a lot of work that has to be done in the municipality to prepare for certain events. So we have rates for this, and we checked in other municipalities for the same type of service. So we have tariffs that are lower than other municipalities. So we have different figures that we can put together at that time. We have a scale. Any questions? No, we'll continue. Page 147, Schedule C, it's the new site. We don't have an official name for it, but it's the new site behind the Centennial Arena. We have tariffs for that, rates for that site in 2021. For the Congress will be the first to have all its events taking place there next summer. So we recommend rates as beforehand, the day of the event, and then for the days where we're setting up or setting down or taking down, we give them a 50% rate that is lower. So if anybody is interested, there will be a reduction of rates of 40% less for accredited associations. Any questions for that one? We shall continue. The next one, Schedule D, Table 2. We have a table that is valid until the end, and then we'll go into Table 2. That will begin September 1st, 2019. So these are tariffs for community rooms. We had them in one policy. Then there would be no increase on the regular rates, but rates that would be coherent with all community rooms in the new complex as well. And it depends on the capacity of each room. If there are new ones that we can rent, we will be able to add them into this policy. Another thing we added is a rate for weddings that is new. So we could have special events. So this would be perfect for the Rotary Park. We had rates set up a few years ago. We want to offer them a package for that type of event. So there's an increase for an hourly rate. For accredited groups, it was $15 an hour for rental before, and now we recommend $25. It's common practice in other communities. This is new. We recommend this increase until May 31st, 2022. So we continue with the same formula for our accredited organizations. For meetings, we give them rooms freely for their meetings. Thank you, Your Worship. For the rental of a hall, what's happening with the former Dover School and the rooms that we have here in City Hall for people to rent in the evenings. Are the rates for Dover in here? At Dover, there's no public rental. We have agreements with the soccer association that uses it on the first floor, and an association that can meet in the basement. For now, we have no team of staff that works there to unlock the doors, so there's logistics involved, so we use them less. For City Hall, we finalized a procedure in order to serve accredited associations, so we give them halls freely for their meetings, but we would prefer if they used other rooms like the Aquatic Center, Rotary, or the Arena before they come here, because we always have, we need them internally. Mr. Leblanc, Cormier Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. When you talk about rental for weddings, does that include the Dwaro House? That wasn't quite ready for these rates tonight, but it will be added in the alphabet that continues until F. And there'll be other things in the complex that we can add. Yes, we have projects to go there for weddings. There is interest. People are asking us, but we weren't quite ready for this project. Thank you. No other question? We can continue. The next one, Schedule E, sports fields. To mention, we removed the cap of $5,000 in my last version for rates. There's no youth group that paid more than $5,000. There was a cap. Most times they pay less than that. They pay for usage. And then since we removed the cap, we work with youth groups. And sports fields are maximized, reservations are placed, and they tell us. And there's a lot of usage. A Dover field, for instance, is going well. So the amendments we propose tonight is to the structure of the rates. We presently have a block of structures, or structure of blocks. So if you use a baseball field on Namiro on all Monday evenings, 5 to 8, you're in one block. So in management, the reservation system has no flexibility for calculation. Will the terrace be a block for a season or 5 weeks? So there's a lot of manual work at the end of each season for us to calculate the terrace. So after a verification with the municipality, we see that some have tariffs set by the hour. It's not much, $5, for instance. So with this work, we're reserving the field right now, and then we don't have to redo it again. It's easier. It's an easier way to work. We've had an exercise on these rental rates for our youth groups. It's very important we don't harm them. So with all these bills at the end of the seasons for our youth groups, none of them receive an increase following these amendments. We have adult groups that will suffer these increases, but none for the youth groups. And there will be a reduction as well in the way they're coordinating their usage. Any questions from councillors? So we shall continue the next table. The last tariff rates that I'm showing you on page 155, these are the swimming pools for the next season. At the Aquatic Center, we've had a review to ensure that we were above the standards. We have amendments to make according to number of lifeguards at the pool and for aqua exercise too. So with this amendment, we had an increase of the number of hours for salaries paid weekly at the Aquatic Center. So these were adjustments that were important, and increasing for private rentals for the pools. We're asking for 5% increase for the next year and 2% for each year afterwards, and an increase for membership cards. And for our bundles as well, there's no increase for rates for children. And for the one-time use and for parties, there will be increases for the private use of pools. So these increases are similar to other pools. At the Aquatic Center, we're a little bit different than other pools because there's a lot of amusements. If you open the slides, we need another lifeguard. And the Tarzan line, too, we need another lifeguard. So there's many more people doing their safe surveillance for the Aquatic Center. So we will have small increases in our tariffs to make adjustments with the increase in salaries that are necessary. Any questions from councillors? Ms. Laboutier, I have a question. At the Aquatic Center and the bundles offered to children on weekends, are they the same prices for residents of Dieppe and others outside? Yes, it's equal for everybody. We have a large clientele that come to our Aquatic Center from outside Dieppe, and we don't charge them anymore with our tariffs beforehand. Before 2 years ago, for membership cards, we charged 10% more for people living outside, but we've removed them because we had complaints. People come work in our community and they want to do sports and exercise in our centers, so we changed them the same rates. Thank you. Councillor Cormier, for children's parties, are there increases for children or in the costs for parties, for rentals, or is it an increase for the people that are renting the facilities? We have 2 bundles for the public. For parties, it's $7 per child, and for the private rental, it's the rental of the space that has been increased by 5%. So it depends on the bundle offered. So it'd be the same rate, but it's calculated with the number of lifeguards as well in the pools, because sometimes we need more lifeguards. Is it rented often for parties? It's used a lot. We have about 600 parties per year. So there's a lot of competition with different facilities in the community. So we have 600 parties per year at the Aquatic Center. It's used a lot. So it's a good news for my curiosity. The next time I'll present my fourth year being there, so I'm going to present to you the increase of the presence of the community and their use of our spaces. So I owe you a presentation very soon. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, that concludes your presentation. Yes. To adopt the new policy, yes. Do we have the resolution? I'm looking for it. For the reading of the resolution, Councillor Cormier. Thank you, Your Worship. The Council accept that the following policies be repealed and replaced by Policy L1 2018 entitled Rental Rates for Facilities and Municipal Spaces. L1 2016 rental rates arenas. L2 2016 rental rates sports fields. L3 2016 rental rates aquatic and sports center. L9 2016 rental rates Rotary Lodge. I so move. Moved by Councillor Cormier, seconded by Councillor Brideau. For the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, nay. Carried as presented. Thank you. 10.2 Finances. Mr. Samal, yes, thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everyone. In the case of 10.2.1, this is management. Each year, a deputy mayor is elected, and we have to sign the banking statements for the resolution. Councillor Alain. Thank you, Your Worship, that Yvon Lapierre, Mayor, or Ernest Thibodeau, Deputy Mayor, and Stéphane Thériault, Treasurer, or Steve Landry, Assistant Treasurer, be hereby authorized to sign all checks issued for and on behalf of the City of Dieppe. I so move. Moved by Councillor Alain, seconded by Councillor Leblanc. For the question? None. All those in favor signify by saying contrary minded, nay.
Carried as presented. 10.3.1, transportation. We have a presentation on this. Mr. Richard. Thank you, Your Worship, council members. Good evening. You should know that with an aging population, we have an increase in special transportation requests. And for 3 years now, you must know that in view of those increase for special transportation, we can't stay within our budgets. So a year ago, we started reassessing the level of services offered to make sure that this program is sustainable over time. You should know also that our special transportation program is more generous than any other in New-Brunswick, but even elsewhere, seeing as we offer the special transportation services for people who are not in wheelchairs compared to other municipalities. So we've looked at all this. So what we bring here tonight are a series of recommendations and changes so that as a municipality, we can have a system that's sustainable over the long haul, but also meet the needs of our Dieppe residents in wheelchairs, as well as those who are not in wheelchairs. Of course, we have a solution that may seem simple. We just add money to the budget, and we'll resolve the issue. Nonetheless, we have to look at our eligibility criteria, which are a little bit vague. So what we're recommending tonight, that is not necessarily approved or known by all stakeholders, but we've talked with many people to better understand the various scenarios, the various issues, and bring about some possible solutions. So what we're presenting tonight are the recommendation from our administration, but I think we can resolve some issues. So here are the recommendations that you received in your package. So we want to talk about various criteria. We have some clients perhaps that don't necessarily need the service throughout the year. So we could have a category because of the weather or seasons. That could be an example of conditional criteria. And we could have some people also, for whatever reason, have an accident or an operation. They're in a wheelchair for whatever reason for a month or two. So that could be a temporary category. These are two categories. And of course, there's the full category, meaning a person, obviously, has the service on a regular basis or needs the service on a regular basis. When it comes to the assessment criteria, the assessment process, following our memorandum, in fact, we didn't give you the eligibility criteria. So we'll have to come back at the next meeting with all the eligibility criteria because we haven't added them right now. But what we propose to do is to add financial capacity, a criteria for financial capacity that we would assess the new requests coming in, but also create an assessment committee internally. Well, with people from outside, like we had with the Access Committee that did part of that job, and look at third parties in some cases. So when we have new requests, some requests are fairly clear. Assessments were already done, seeing as either they live in a nursing home, but there are some cases that are perhaps a little less obvious to do so. We would call upon people, specialists in the field of special transportation or a person's disability. So that's one of our recommendations. Something else also, to follow our budgets, we will develop calculations allowing us to have a maximum number of clients and also a maximum number of routes per client based on priorities and needs, obviously. So we know, for instance, we have a budget. We can estimate the average cost per trip. So that's how we could reach a specific amount. Meaning, possibly, it's not guaranteed, but possibly, we could have some people that would be on a waiting list. So what we would do, we would have our database of clients, and then when a client moves or passes away, etc., we could add someone who's on a waiting list, and that waiting list would be based on priorities, based on needs. This would be done through our assessment committee. We also hope to reassess all present clients in our system. There's about 300 clients right now, and more than half of those are in wheelchairs, and more than half also are in seniors' homes. In terms of rates, until a few years ago, we tried to maintain the same fees for those who use public transit as well as special transportation. In fact, we reduced our rates a few years ago to do so. With the increase of rates going up starting the 1st of January 2019, we could adjust it to $2.75, but for logistical reasons, the whole question of 25 cents for service providers, etc., we would suggest going to $3. That would be a set rate, and this would be an increase of $1 for trips outside Dieppe, meaning Moncton or Riverview. And the last thing, about a year ago now, we've been looking with our volunteer center. They offer, services of volunteer drivers. That program is offered to residents in Dieppe. In some cases, the criteria are very specific. We want to go a little further. Couldn't we, for instance, have something like this in Dieppe to meet the needs between those who are in the program and those who are on a waiting list or those who are not eligible. And those that would fall in a gray area or are not eligible, we'd like to explore this because we think we have several people retired in Dieppe who would be ready, and I say, there are some people that be ready to do some volunteer work, and I think we have a good pool of people who already do some volunteer work, and perhaps they'd like to work with Dieppe. We're exploring this. It's one recommendation that we're making tonight to say, yes, let's say you agree with this. We think this could be a winning partnership for Dieppe and also for the volunteer center. This could be positive. So this is what you have in the resolution. We want to explain all this, and if you have any questions, we're here to answer your questions.
Question de la part des membres.
Questions from council members? Mrs. Leboutillier? Right now, anyone, we see there are 300 clients, is that correct? Yes, thereabouts. How many apply? Is it 300? Are there some people who don't qualify right now? Oh, yes. In our database, we have about 800 wells. This goes back 7-8 years now. We have some people either moved away or passed away, etc. And as we update this database on a yearly basis, we have 300 active clients, and there are some people that have been turned down because we have a, we have a new criteria not to accept people who are not in a wheelchair. That was a criteria to meet our budget. Within these 300 clients each week, we have new requests coming in each week. Either we accept those requests because they meet our criteria, or we don't for now. They don't really meet the criteria, and they fall in that gray area, as I mentioned, in the moratorium. With the new recommendations that we're proposing, some of these people were turned down because of this rule, because in the database, we said maybe it's temporary, and if there are any changes, we would communicate with them again. So it's these people that were turned down. Possibly they could be eligible with what we're proposing tonight. I don't know if that answers your question, Mrs. Well, yes, I wanted to see the scope, the number of people who applied and do not qualify. But yes, you've answered, yeah, we're looking at about 800 people. 70 to 80 people who apply are accepted, most of them. Thank you, Councillor Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. We've received, Luc, you'll recall, in early November, around the 13th of November, a message from Direct Taxi NB showing some issues when it comes to income from that organization. They've even included another company saying there were some reductions of about 65% in their income, and their profitability was in jeopardy. I'd like to know if these recommendations, would that lighten, would that help that situation? I assume you've looked at this issue of direct taxi. Will that help them when it comes to incomes? Because we wouldn't want to lose those organizations and seek others to offer this type of service. Right now, we have 2 service providers for our special transportation program following a tender a few years ago. We had one provider, the wheelchair guide, that was accepted to be our single provider for those in wheelchair, because of course you need special equipment, special vehicles. And then the municipality, we accepted that was a first, the proposal from 2 other providers for those who are not in a wheelchair, Taxi Direct as well as the wheelchair guy. So that approach at that time was that the client could decide between those 2 providers and call upon them. So of course for Taxi Direct, or Direct Taxi, the impact of the moratorium we put in place impacted them more than the wheelchair guy, because the wheelchair guy, nonetheless, he had a certain number of clients in wheelchairs. There was an increase of clients in that group. But what we're suggesting here, we think this will stabilize the issues. And you've mentioned it. I've spoken to both providers. We often speak to both of them, but I've talked to them about these recommendations, and they seem to be in favor of both of them. And we think this will resolve part of the issues that direct taxi experienced. All right, thank you. Thank you. No further questions. So to read this resolution, Mr. Godet. Thank you. The Council accepts the Administration's recommendation to better manage participant eligibility for the Special Transportation Program municipal grant and to better control the fluctuation of costs incurred by the program in order to meet the annual budget. Oh, I just lost my place. All right. To meet the annual budget, right. Consequently, Council agrees that the Administration, 1, establish eligibility criteria, categories, complete, conditional, and temporary. 2, add financial capacity to eligibility criterions. 3, create an assessment committee comprised of individuals with knowledge and expertise to assess eligibility requests. 4, perform, when required, customer assessment through third-party specialization in various fields. 5, establish a maximum number of customers eligible for service at a ratio of 65% of customers with wheelchairs and 35% of customers without wheelchair. Limit the number of subsidized trips per person based on the needs analysis. 7, establish and maintain a waiting list for customers who wish to use the service, a list of customers with wheelchairs, and another list without wheelchairs. 8, prioritize customers on waiting lists. Oh, this is not scrolling down. 8, prioritize customers on waiting lists based on the needs analysis. 9, proceed with the reassessment of all customers who are currently eligible for services. 10, increase the fare per ride within Dieppe to $3. Public transit will be set at $2.75 from January 1st, 2019, and outside city limits to $6, currently set at $5. 11, implement the new measures on January 1st, 2019. 12, explore the implementation of a volunteer drivers program for customers without wheelchairs. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Godet, seconded by Councillor Alain. On the question. No questions. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Carried as presented. Thank you. Now this brings us to item what? 11, municipal bylaws. With bylaw 11.1, Mr. Sima. Thank you, Your Worship. Indeed, we're at A11 bylaw. Starting on the 1st of January 2019, Revenue Canada will eliminate the remuneration for councillors. So we have a working group to make recommendations when it comes to remuneration. This group made 2 recommendations last October, and bylaw A11 that you have before you implements the first recommendation made by this group. That is to adjust elected members' salary to counter assessing these tax-free allocations. Allows you to end your mandate without losing anything in your allowance, without being penalized. So January 1st, 2019, until the 30th of May 2020, you'll continue to receive about the same net income as you do now. So this is bylaw A11 for first reading by title only. Thank you for reading by title, Councillor LeBlanc. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw number A-11, a bylaw of the City of Dieppe adjusting the remuneration of the mayor and the councillors to counter the effects of the 2019 tax changes. I so move first reading by title only. Move first reading by title by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau on the question. No question. All those in favor, this bylaw number A-11, please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Sorry, not the resolution, but the bylaw A11 is accepted in first reading by title. We'll go with second reading again by title. It's only Mr. LeBlanc. Bylaw number A-11, a bylaw of the City of Dieppe adjusting the remuneration of the mayor and the councillors to counter the effects of the 2019 tax changes. I so move in second reading by title. Moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau on the question. No question. All those in favor? Bylaw A-11, second reading by title, please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. So bylaw A-11 is accepted as presented. Now for A-12, Mr. Simard. Yes. So A-12, this bylaw implements the second recommendation of our working group on remuneration, as I've mentioned, to increase council members' salaries. So it takes into account various responsibilities, the various required skills and knowledge, and we want to attract various people as mayor and councillors. We have to point out, Your Worship, that this bylaw for council members will only come into effect on the 1st of January 2020. 1st of June, right. The 1st of June, I'm sorry. 1st of June 2020, indeed. So that means after the next council is elected here. Thank you. The mayor's salary progressively will go from, in 2020, from $53,900 to $78,000 in 2024. There you go. Thank you for information to read this bylaw by title, Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw number A-12, a bylaw of the City of Dieppe respecting the remuneration of the mayor and council members starting on June 2020. I so move in first reading. Moved first reading by Councillor Brideau, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau on the question. No questions? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, questions, sorry. Thank you, there we go. Thank you very much, Your Worship. So, this bylaw this evening, I'll vote against this motion. I've spoken of this to all of you before, but first of all, I'd like to thank the group of citizens that nonetheless gave us that scale. They've worked hard on this pay scale, and it's something that we are examining. It's a nebulous, it's a vague subject. We saw this in l'Acadie Nouvelle. It's not easy to talk about wage increases. But I want to congratulate the city because we were transparent up to now. We're comparing things that are comparable. For 20 years now, no one at the council has received a wage increase, so we have to point that out. Comparing apples with apples, other communities, surrounding communities, have per diems. Other cities, they get tickets to go to the Avenir Center at every turn. So at the end of the day, the salary takes into account that we have expenses. Our own expenses are within those wages. So I just want to point out that I'll vote against this. I think the pay scale proposed over 4 years, perhaps this could have been spread over 10 years. I find that the percentage is fairly high. This is a high increase, so that is why I'll vote against it, Your Worship. Thank you. So, anyone else? Mrs. Debussy. Yes, on the same wavelength, the same idea. I also, on this bylaw, I'll vote against it based on the information that was provided, but also on the fact that the percentage of that increase, as we've said, we have a committee in place that it's worked, but when it comes to, it's difficult to compare this, especially when it comes, especially in view of this high increase. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Anyone else? Otherwise, all those in favor, bylaw number A-12, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay? No. We record 2 noes. So A12 has been passed in first reading by title only. We'll go with second reading by title once again. Mr. Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw number A-12, a bylaw of the City of Dieppe respecting the remuneration of council members starting in June 2020. I so move in second reading, Your Worship. Moved in second reading by Councillor Brideau, seconded by Councillor Thibodeau. On the question. On the question, no questions. So all those in favor, bylaw A12 in second reading by title only, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. So we'll record the 2 noes. And bylaw number A12 is carried by in second reading by title only. So we'll go with Z2 2018 when it comes to dangerous places. Mr. Simard. So bylaw Z2, it's a procedure that's simply administrative in nature. We want to follow the new act on governance that was implemented on the 1st of January. So this is a follow-up to the last council meeting that we've had. So we're reading it, third reading by title. Thank you. So for bylaw Z2, to read it in full, Mr. Cognier. Thank you, Your Worship. A bylaw number Z2 2018, a bylaw of the municipality of Dieppe respecting dangerous or unsightly premises pursuant to the authority vested in it by the Local Governance Act, SNB 2017, Chapter 18, the Council of the City of Dieppe, duly assembled, enacts as follows. 1. Section 130 to 145 and 151 to 155 of the Local Governance Act, including any amendments thereto, apply to the whole area within the limits of the municipality of Dieppe. Repeal bylaw number Z-2 entitled A Bylaw of the Municipality of Dieppe Respecting Dangerous or Unsightly Premises, ordained and passed on July 14, 2008, and all amendments thereto is hereby repealed. I so move. Moved by Councillor Cormier, seconded by Councillor Arsenault. On the question. No questions. All those in favor of this resolution say aye. Contrary minded, nay. So bylaw Z2 2018 is carried. So we'll go with the third and last lecture by title only. Mr. Cormier, a bylaw number Z-2 2018, a bylaw of the municipality of Dieppe respecting dangerous or unsightly premises. I so move in third reading by title. Moved by Councillor Cormier by title that we accept bylaw Z2, seconded by Mrs. Arsenault. On the question. No question. All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. So bylaw Z2, when it comes to dangerous and unsightly premises, is accepted in third reading. 12 motions, no notice of motions. 13 inquiries and announcement by members of council. And we'll start to my left with Councillor Allais. as soon as I turn on his microphone. There we go. Thank you very much. So 2 things. I just want to congratulate Mathieu Martin in the high school tournament this weekend. Girls and guys won. So congratulations to all our students. Also, point out the presence of hometown hockey here this weekend. You represented us well, Your Worship, and to people like Jean-François Danfos, the Leblanc family, Charlie Bourgeois. It was great on TV with Ron McLean. We had many activities in town, and it was great to see everyone in good shape. So it was great. Thank you, Councillor Arsenault. Thank you, Your Worship. A question and one thank you. The electronic sign that we had at the corner of Acadie and Champlain over the weekend, that was quite visible. It was great. Could we have this there permanently, an electronic sign like that in the corner? Who was responsible for that? Everyone's looking at each other. No one says anything. Mrs. Gay, that was a request that was made by the parade. Okay, yeah. I thought it was great having that there. It was so visible. Could we have one, a sign like this at the same location for any announcement? We're very limited with this type of sign in terms of number of letters that can be put on the sign. So it's not something that we could use on a regular basis. We've done so in the past for some events, like when we closed the Marsh for construction a few years ago, because it's something that's very short as a message, closure. But to announce activities, it may not be the best the best method, but it belongs to the city, so we use it occasionally. Thank you very much.
The other thing, it's a thank you letter. Your Worship, councillors, as a citizen with hearing problems in Dieppe and Moncton, sitting on the board of directors of the Association of People with Hearing Problems, in the name of all citizens of Dieppe who have a hearing problem, recently your council accepted to install an FM system in the council chambers to allow for people with hearing problems to hear clearly your meetings. Thank you to the city of Dieppe who heard the residents of Dieppe, and it means a lot to us, a group that is isolated sometimes because of their handicap. Loss of hearing is not an isolated problem, but it's the 3rd biggest health problem in Canada. This loss is invisible. Many of our citizens in Dieppe live with this kind of loss. We hope that with the bill C-81, people with a handicap will be better served. This bill was presented to Parliament last June and was recently adopted in 2nd reading in the Chamber of in the House of Commons. There was a permanent committee, and we were happy with this bill because it will permit people in our society to participate with their handicaps with this FM system that's been installed in Dieppe. Dieppe made the first step for this legislation it's important to underline that it helps our daily life, and with a reduction of hearing, we can understand better conversations of every day, and to hear and understand are two different elements. People with problem in hearing can hear some things but doesn't understand the whole sentence. So people with this kind of problem often need other systems so that they can better live every day and to participate in social activities. Thank you, Réal Léger. Thank you as well to you, Réal Léger, for all you've done for this file. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Arsenault. Councillor Thibodeau, thank you, Your Worship. Also, I want to congratulate the Matador stars of Mathieu Martin, who won on the weekend. And as well, I wanted to mention that for the first time today, I went on to Talkbone, and I'm happy. It's going well. Traffic is going well. Thank you, Councillor Thibodeau, Ms. de Poutillier. Firstly, congratulations to the city staff for the initiative this weekend. It took a lot of time to put this into place. It was well organized. All the volunteers were there. It was a great visibility for our city. Congratulations as well. Congratulations to Mathieu Martin. Have a good week. Thank you, Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. 2 points I want to mention. This weekend, November 30th, as you know, we have a radiothon for the Tree of Hope. And I'm a volunteer, and we're expecting a lot of visitors. So everybody's welcome, and we'll have events all day. And people will be discussing their experiences. December 1st, we won't be able to park on the streets anymore because we will be getting tickets. Councillor Cormier, thank you, Your Worship. I have an invitation to citizens that our oval is open for skating, and I join other council members to congratulate our teams at Mathieu Martin for their victory on this weekend, and I didn't even get cold during all these games. Councillor Leblanc, thank you, Your Worship. I have an announcement with the opening with our skating oval. At 1604, we have on December 8th, Plaisir sur Glace. We have events, skating events. Please visit our website. It starts on December 7th. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Godet, thank you, Your Worship. I have 2 points this evening. I want to congratulate Optic, a company in Dieppe that won the prize for the business of the year with the New-Brunswick Economic Council. Few people know that company. They're on Champlain Street. They have about 30 employees who are experts in technology. They make printers for different machines with in gambling. And they work in a lot of countries. 95% of their products are exported, so congratulations to them. Secondly, I would like to mention that the campaign for the sale of seats for the Inter Center started, and we hope that all people will think seriously to buy seats so we can put their names on the seats. to become a part of this great adventure for this center, and we have a formula to buy these seats. Is diverse. The means of paying is different. It can be over a few months or years. So I ask people to donate and to buy seeds for our center. Thank you for those who are interested. There's always people skating on our oval. Right now, if you look at the camera on 1604 Place, to get back to local hockey, we must thank staff, especially Julie Bélanger, for her excellent work to prepare for this weekend. I also want to remind everyone that on the 30th, Friday, there will be a launch of the Tree of Hope, and there will be the mayor's breakfast. If you don't want to disappoint the mayor, please be present. Aside from that, thank you to everyone that is involved in hockey here. It's appreciated. I like to watch the hockey games, and I don't know how many times I heard the word Dieppe. So the mayor was smiling all afternoon watching a hockey game that wasn't overly interesting. So thank you, everybody.